Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry. We were not late, and this was so polished. Our welcome was so polished. But you know what? I had not clicked go live yet. So I promise we're a tech company. I work in brand and marketing, so don't worry. I'm not on the back end of any tech. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Halford. Can someone please comment and just make sure we're definitely live? We've been going for 6 minutes. Thank you to our hosts. I'm desperately sorry. I'm not going to do the whole welcome I did before because I don't want to spend 3 minutes when we have such amazing guests joining us. A little bit of housekeeping. Please comment, join the conversation. We'll talk about your comments and questions at the end. And wherever you're watching from, it's all aggregated into one stream, so we'll be able to see it. Carlo is going to be facilitating this conversation. He's our innovation and strategy lead at Rise8. Before that, he spent 6 years as an acquisitions officer, stood up a software factory in the Air Force and the Space Force. Okay, good, we're live. I see comments. I'm so sorry. Oh, embarrassing. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. I'm going to bring everyone on stage now and get the heck out of here. Have a good one.
Nice. Awesome. Sorry, everybody, to keep you all waiting, but we're glad that we're all here now. So thanks, Elizabeth. What's up, everybody? My name is Carlo, and like Elizabeth mentioned, I'm the Innovation and Strategy Lead at Rise8. I'll be your host and facilitator for today's event, but just really wanted to say thank you all for joining us and sitting through 5 minutes of waiting on us to get things going. We are here to talk about transforming the Department of Defense into a software company. And this is like a topic that hits very, very close to home to a lot of us, and then especially me being prior military. I have a ton of great questions lined up, and to be honest, there's probably not going to be enough time because this discussion can just go on forever. But let's just get right to introducing our guests. For our guests, I will call out your name, and if you don't mind spending, like 30 seconds or so introducing yourself, where you're coming from and your role, and then maybe as a fun question, what's your favorite holiday movie? So we'll start with Siobhan.
All right. Thanks, Carlo. 30 seconds. Is that what you said? All right. And I do work in tech, so it's my fault that didn't happen the first time. It's just easier, right? So I'm with Kohl's. Been with Kohl's for about 2 years, running their digital stores and supply chain tech. But more interestingly, I had a chance a couple of years ago to spend with the Kessel Run team when I was with Pivotal, and we sort of worked together on helping with some of the early transformation over there. So spent a lot of my career working on how do you actually think about transformation, especially on the people aspect of things, tech interesting, the people aspect being even more. Excited to be here. And I'm going to wait. I'm thinking about my holiday movie, so give me a minute. You can come back to me. I got to get a winner on that one.
Cool. Brian will go next.
I'm Brian, CEO of Rise8, and I kind of started my digital transformation journey at Kessel Run, helped found and scale that before starting Rise8 to be able to scale more horizontally. My favorite Christmas movie right now, I have 4 kids, and the favorite Christmas movie in our house is Jingle Jangle. If you haven't seen Jingle Jangle, you need to. It's awesome.
Thanks, Brian. Let's go with Rachel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Zoll. I am currently I'm the chief of product for a Space Force software development organization called Kobayashi Maru. I started my transformation working at Kessel Run as a product designer. And my favorite Christmas movie, I always say White Christmas, but it's to the point where I watch it every year and I could say all the things. So I don't know if I'm watching anymore. So I will say Klaus. It's like Klaus with a K, which I think is actually how you spell Klaus. But it's on Netflix and it is so good. So good.
Thanks, Rachel. And then last but not least, Adam.
Sure, thanks. My name is Adam Furtado. I've spent basically my whole life in and around government. The last 10 of them in the kind of software and digital space. Worked with all of these folks closely in helping build and lead Kessel Run from a product leader perspective. And more recently as an independent consultant trying to help organizations and companies, utilize some of those practices and patterns that made us successful. From a Christmas movie perspective, there's a new one on Netflix called The Boy Called Christmas. And I like it because it's the first time that my son's 5, he was able to see what surprise ending looked like. So now he makes everybody in our family watch it, but he ruins the surprise for everybody because he can't help himself. So that's been pretty fun.
Awesome. And then Siobhan, go back. Did you want to bring up a movie?
No, I'm holding out. I'm
Cool.
keep
All right.
going on tender hooks.
All right. Right. We'll say that for the very end. Cool. So before we get going, at our last web event, our previous Rise8 host, Ramona, laid out some ground rules of engagement for our panelists. So I just love to quickly mention that here. One, we ask that all of our panelists that you try to listen as much as you speak. We want to make sure that we give everybody a shared opportunity to speak and that we can effectively hear and capture everything that y'all are going to be sharing with everybody. Two, feel free to ask me any questions or clarifying questions to help navigate the conversation. And then the last one, definitely quoting Ramona, try not to wax poetic. Basically, just try not to use too many buzzwords. The audience could come from very different backgrounds and may or may not be familiar with the defense or federal terminology and all of the acronym-isms that we're traditionally used to. Structure of the conversation, I'll throw out some questions around some topics. Each panelist, if you could respond in a couple minutes, share your thoughts, opinions, and insights. Afterwards, we'll try to open it up at the very end for our audience for like 10 minutes to ask any questions. So don't be afraid to all of our viewers out there to throw any comments, questions, emojis, likes in the chat, and I'll do my best to kind of follow and incorporate it. Any questions to our panel before we kind of get things going? Sweet. So the way we wanted to like shape and frame the conversation about transforming the DoD into a software company is around a few things. We say like the key elements of a successful transformation initiative kind of revolve around people, process, technology, and even brand. So our conversation is going to be hitting on points around all of those things. But before we even get into that, it's really important to understand like why we are even here. Like, why is this a thing? Why do we even want to talk about it? And so maybe a good place to start is with you, Siobhan. Like, you've seen both the government and commercial side of transformation in kind of a variety of verticals. Like, what is the why behind transformation? And do you think it applies across both?
Complicated question. So thanks for starting with me. I think it doesn't actually matter what industry, what vertical, private or public. The impetus for transformation is that, people want to win, whatever that win is, whether it's sell more jeans, whether it's help protect lives, whatever those things are. And the game of that, it just can't be done the old way. And so whether folks agree, disagree, technology is going to play a huge part of that. Reduce the risks, increase your shot at actually whatever that winning is. It's being crystal clear on like, we're solving this problem, we're aiming at this goal. There's lots of ways to achieve it. This iterative, this more sort of customer focused or user-centered way of doing it, it's just got a higher probability of success. That's the evidence we've all seen over the last 10, 15 years. So it isn't like trying to, sell a religion or anything. This is like, hey, we believe that this is a better way to do it. It's a better way to reduce risk to achieve your outcome, whatever that outcome happens to be. And it doesn't actually matter what industry you're in. Everyone we've all got to level up on the game. We just have to. And I don't want to quote a bunch of different things, but like this is like the slowest it's ever going to be right here, right now. So like I sent a note to Brian earlier, like we all got to buckle up. Like faster is what it's going to be, but thoughtful, right? Paced change, I think, is going to be how we win.
Cool. Adam, why do you think this is important that we're kind of talking about transforming the DoD into a software company?
I think because we have to. I think it's years ago it felt like a choice, like you could decide whether to have a digital strategy or not, and now we just live in a world that's changing around us, and we can decide to not adapt to it and go away or not. So I think that the choice is less of ours, and it's like, do we want to survive in the world that we happen to be in now? And hopefully we make the right answer, I guess.
Rachel, what do you think? Do you think it's similar lines, or is there something a little bit different?
Yeah, no, I think we are probably all going to say it definitely feels that we're at the point where we have taken a look, and it's not only just like, oh, somebody just tried something new once and we learned something. We have seen stories, we have seen things play out, and if we truly do believe in learning from those examples, understanding what best practices are, and moving forward. This is part of that. This is us like taking that step, and this is us figuring out how to take those steps, because we know we what we're doing isn't working. We have kind of all said that. The acquisition community for the DoD has taken steps to change doctrine and update things. So they've seen that. There's evidence that we've seen those things. So it's kind of like we are in it. It's happening. But how can we kind of keep it going and make sure that we really do transform?
Yeah, and then Brian, I mean, you've made that leap about 2 years now from being in the government and now continuing transformation. Why do you think like this is still important to still talk about transforming the DoD into that software company?
Yeah, I agree with everything everybody said. I don't have much to add there. I would say there's one thing that kind of happens in parallel, which is, our ability to learn. So there's, the technology, what it's really enabling is people to learn really fast, gather information quickly, respond quickly, sense and respond, as it were. Title of a book. I feel like that's too corny for me, but it's really true. And what's interesting in the DoD is, we used to be able to sense and respond, or there's variations of this, the OODA loop, very similar to build, measure, learn in a lot of ways, but they're all about how quickly can you learn compared to your competitor. And what's interesting in the current landscape, I would say it's not just that we're not learning as fast as our digital peers. It's actually that in some ways the technology has caused us to even learn slower, I would argue. It's getting in the way of good process, and like the technology, people got so invested in technology over the last decade, bad technology, that it actually made their processes worse and slower. And so I think in a lot of ways we're in a worse place than we were even a decade ago. Because of technology. So it's an imperative even to get our business processes better, not just make digital better.
Cool. You mentioned all of the things that we're planning to talk about today, like people, processes, and technology. And so like diving right into that, we wanted to start specifically with people. I think like we say that like culture drives process, which in turn drives technology. And tools are useful, but tools don't lead transformations. People do. And like the ability to learn is around people, and like people are the ones that are learning and trying to figure out how do we make this into that software company. And so I wanted to spend time on people. If anybody knows me, I'm super opinionated and believe that people are the most important aspect of that transformation and becoming a software company. And so let's start with kind of a conversation around values. As you all have experienced, transforming kind of large bureaucracies, and especially the DoD, the largest bureaucracy on the planet, is so hard. It's especially hard to find people who are willing to, challenge the status quo, be innovative, and like tackle the beast that is the Department of Defense. Despite that, though, we've seen all of these initiatives like Kessel Run, Kobayashi Maru, Platform One, Bespin, and more like continuing to grow. And so what do you all believe, what value or changes in DoD culture that directly impact people are important to becoming a software company? Let's start with Rachel.
Cool. Okay. So I'm going to say one that's more near and dear to me in being in the acquisition community and seeing kind of that change and shift that us trying to work in this way has caused. And one of the best things, and this kind of was one of our core values at Kessel Run, and I'm going to add a little onto the end, but that intense customer focus, but in everything we do. So from how we work with each other and the outputs that we are, the outcomes that we're all driving towards, whether they're shared or whether we have touch points that we need, that we're responsible to each other for, keeping that in mind, I feel like changes are the way that we interact as an organization internally, and then externally thinking, really having that two-way conversation. And I've heard you talk about this, Carlo, like being an acquisitions officer, being in other program offices and in our training, we aren't trained to go talk to a user. We aren't really trained to go try and figure out who those people are or understand their problem space, understand what they do every day, or understand how they do their job or what their job is. We are trained to just understand how to try and form an acquisition plan and a strategy and a really long timeline for things that we can kind of orchestrate a lot of things that need to come together. That's what we're trained to do. And so the transformation really, this was the biggest one for me, where it opened us up to say, look, like we have customers and we can talk to them, and actually talking to them helps us understand how we can get them something that will be valuable, and understand what we can get them sooner that will be like the highest value for them. We can prioritize things. Then we don't have to wait years and form really large plans to try and deliver something and do the job. The job is like also partly talking to them. That's part of the job, and we're allowed and empowered to do that. So that one for me, huge piece that I think in some of my work with Kessel Run, also just kind of standing up our customer experience as well and scaling that past just our hands-on keyboard users, but also thinking about in the military, those hands-on keyboard users have leaders, and those leaders are going to interact with our program office as well. So there are really small things that we can do to make that interaction positive, gain champions, gain advocacy, which is really needed for program offices to kind of be able to be in this transition. That piece is also crucial here. So intense customer focus in everything we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Adam, like, what was it like for you when you made that transition into leading Kessel Run? And, what kind of values do you think were like hugely critical in kind of making it what it is today?
Yeah, I think the entirety of government is set up to prioritize things and stuff and output, whether that's the acquisition system or your OPRs or anything else. Like everything, you're incentivized to do stuff and build stuff and buy stuff. So we don't really have an outcome-based focus that is focused on the things that actually matter, as Rachel was just talking to. So I think what you saw at Kessel Run and at Section 31 and Platform One, and you name all the people who had some semblance of success here, there's a group of people who were not willing to deal with the output-based nature of government and focused on things that they felt mattered to them. And I think that the struggle that we've all, the entire ecosystem has had since then, is that was all done based on brute force and sheer will and cult of personality and all things that we've found are non-sustainable when you live within a system that optimizes for output. So while I'm happy with the things we were all able to do collectively as a community, I'm disappointed that we haven't seen the sustainment come after that. We haven't learned from the successes. We just like saw the shiny things. We want software factories and t-shirts. We want more stuff. So I'm a cynical former government employee though. So, take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, maybe I'll pass it to another cynical former government employee. And Brian, what would you say kind of is critical also from a value standpoint and what we kind of did back then?
Yeah, I think an interesting one that I don't talk about as much is, it was ideas over rank at Kessel Run. At Rise8, we talk about ideas over titles. That's like interesting when you think about it in the very obvious sense of, it's about the idea, who has the best ideas. But there's an interesting thing there around how that plays out in leadership and leadership growth. I think one interesting thing that you see in a hallmark of an organization that's actually putting ideas first is that relatively junior people will grow through the ranks quickly. And you might see some people that are at the top of the ranks that maybe find new homes. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. There's plenty of opportunities for people all around, but in these types of organizations, if ideas are put first, you'll see junior people climb quickly, and you also see senior people climb quickly too, right? The idea there is that your place in the organization is determined by merit and how good your ideas are and how well you execute them. And I think that's really important because it speaks to the thing that Adam was talking about. At some point you hit a ceiling, but at least within your organization, say a Kessel Run or a Platform One, those people have to be able to rise to leadership positions and quickly, or the organization just fails. And I think that's where most early, really, promising new starts fail, is they never allow their leadership to grow up organically.
Now, Siobhan, I intentionally chose for this question to have all of the three former Kessel runners go first, because I wanted to kind of juxtapose whether or not you think we were aligned or thought about, do we interpret bringing in the right values, both from kind of your perspective of inside and outside? So maybe over to you for that.
I could just add on to Brian, Adam, and Rachel's and say, and in all of the companies I've worked with, it's the exact same. So it is, humans are humans. I don't care where you work. There may be more rigidity and more sort of control points or whatever if you're, building software for an airplane versus a whatever, but you're going to have the same things. And there's two things that I think about. So first of all, this sucks, but you have to be okay of letting go being right. If you actually want to get, can I say shit? Well, fine. I said it. You got to let go of being right if you want to get shit done. If you don't, and if you can't do that, whether you're a junior person or a senior person, this is where you get it's the most friction. You'll always get the most friction there. And I think that it weaves into this idea of whether it's just a corporation or the military or the Air Force, or pick your favorite, this idea of certainty and people being comfortable with certainty and knowing versus ambiguity. And that's where I would say to Brian, like for me, good ideas from wherever they come from, rise fast, absolutely. People, I don't care who you are, as a leader, you have to be super, super comfortable. Like ambiguity has to be your superpower. And if it isn't, this is never going to work. You'll do one or two things, but you won't do it sustained over time. And if you can't be comfortable with ambiguity, you can't inspire. It's just been my experience over the last decade or so. So for me, those two things, and I think they exist. It doesn't matter if you're a small shop down the corner or you're dealing with Castle Run. Those are what you're going to face. There's a million other things, but those to me, if you can figure out how to let go of being right, and if you can lean into ambiguity and be okay not knowing, I think you can experiment. You can put the customer first. You can let people who are analysts, suddenly maybe they're going to be the product leader. All those things come to light.
This is really great. I actually want to now like kind of pull on that thread of leadership that both Brian and Siobhan kind of covered. We've talked about values, but I think we haven't talked about like the critical aspect of creating that environment and enabling this culture that we're like looking to create. Comes down to not just the people that are part of this like software company, but like the leadership. And so I wanted to kind of touch on, what do you believe is the role of leadership in transforming like an organization into a software company? Maybe like what kinds of patterns have you witnessed around leadership, ideal or maybe less than ideal, kind of over the years? Maybe let's start with Brian, kind of continue from there.
Wow. So first of all, Siobhan, we say ship happen. We make ship happen.
Same.
Ship happens. Yeah, it's good. It's a great edit. No, I loved that answer too, by the way. I think on the leadership piece, first I'll say like a higher comment just for everybody to watch out for. This is a trap. We fell into it at Kessel Run. Section 31 did it. Everybody that I've seen do this does it. Most of these things start as grassroots kind of changes. Not all of them. There are some times where the CIO mandates it, and I've seen some of those too at different organizations. But by and large, even when that happens, there's been a grassroots movement that's been going on for a while, or they have to leverage a grassroots to get things off the ground, like those initial change agents. And we at that level tends to overemphasize grassroots and like bottom-up change and a rejection of management and leadership in ways that are very equally unhealthy to the way that bureaucracy thinks about those things. And so the best leaders that I've seen are the ones that understand there's a really fine balance there between the old system of management and there's still a new system of management, not just no management or a complete rejection of management and leadership. To answer your question more directly, though, I really like how Dora has laid out the transformational leader in their studies. I would always recommend people start there. One thing that always speaks to me there, and Simon Sinek had a similar phrase. I think he phrased it as CEOs should be the chief vision officer. A lot of times, especially this is me at Rise8, sometimes I get so down in the weeds and like focused on executing things, wearing so many hats, that I forget my most important job is to set the vision and just communicate it over and over and over. You can never over communicate vision. And it's funny, even when I talk to people that I crossed paths with back in Kessel Run, none of them remember like the crazy hours that I put in or any of the other stuff. They're like, oh, that speech you gave or like whatever. And I know Adam has that too, Rachel. And a lot of the things I remember about Siobhan are like these speeches or sometimes they were diatribes she was laying into me on my inadequacies. So by the way, Siobhan's like one of my mentors. So, but yeah, those are the most important things that I can say. Like just being aspirational, inspiring people. People are going to get the work done. You just need to be the thing that keeps them going.
Hey, Carlo, can I jump in before being
Yes.
Is that rude?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what Brian has said is like super foundational to all of this. And the work, the act of leadership is this storytelling thing, right? So this is you got to do it all the time because the idea that people will understand the nuance of the big vision is naive. We have got to take it down and bring it to storytelling. And then you have to do it. I think it's 10 hours a day, 5 days a week for the rest of your life. And then maybe it'll land, right? Like that's the job. It's just the job. And I don't think by nature, we're just naturally gifted at storytelling unless we practice it. So that has to be, like, that is such an important part of it. And I think it gets, we're doing this and we're going to build it and it turns into a feature factory, as we all know. The storytelling, the why, how I'm going to impact people's lives, whether it be someone shopping in a store, someone doing something else, like we've got to be able to bring that thread through. And that's actually really complicated. That's why leaders have the bigger paychecks and all the other power and all the rest, but that's the job.
Yeah, thanks, Siobhan. Adam, you're in the middle of this transition. Like you just left kind of the government side, both in leadership and now looking and figuring out how to help other organizations and folks. What are you thinking about differently from a leadership standpoint, or what are you observing now maybe that's different from when you were within the government?
Yeah, I think I'm just following experiences that Siobhan and then Brian had before me, but my experience at Kessel Run is wildly different than it is in my current role as a consultant. Actually, Rachel probably a bit too, in that at Kessel Run, both by sheer luck and some strategy, the leadership for the most part was always people who were like really aligned and really wanted to move forward and change things. There was kind of already bought in. When you're trying to execute a digital transformation from the outside with people who are already there, who have ingrained incentives built over decades of time, it's a much different experience. And so I think it's what I've found is if you let's say that you're an active duty military person and you've gone through your entire career from the academy and all these schools about being a commander, and like you're reading books about General Patton, and then like you get to this position where you can finally like lead the troops into battle. And then like I come in as a consultant, like let's talk about empowered teams. So what we're going to do now is like they're going to make their own decisions, and you're going to head up and you're going to resource them and support them. You're like, what? But I bought that hat with the bayonet or whatever. And I think it's the same thing for like civil servants who have been in government forever. It's like you worked your way up through this system that has incentivized you to do certain things. And now we're telling you something completely different. So our mental models are changed. I did some research on here around like what a digital native is, right? So people who grow up in the internet, era are digital natives, and they have different ways, like their brains are wired differently. People who are digital natives think about network communication, have less patience for hierarchy, they multitask more, all these things, right? So it got me thinking that like, if I'm communicating with somebody who we would call the frozen middle or whatever, they're not bad people. They don't want to do a bad job. They just live in a different world than I do. It's like playing Battleship with somebody and you get an idea of where their ships are, but you actually don't really know. They're like living in an entirely different setup. So I guess what I'm saying is I think we should make a little bit more effort in empathizing with the world that are the people we're trying to change live within, both for ourselves from a strategic perspective, but also just to be good humans. But and I think it's we make this kind of like story about it, but really it's just like people have like wildly different perspectives of the world. They're not wrong. They just are.
Yeah, and then Rachel, I mean, that going from Kessel Run to Kobayashi Maru, same kind of question. Like, what is the difference, or what are you seeing, and like, what have you learned?
Yeah, change. Siobhan mentioned change, and that can mean really big emotional events. And I think like leadership is crucial there to make sure that we're like, as we are making decisions, or as things are changing, that those things are being communicated, that we're identifying that people are being impacted by that change. And as much as we can, as we're going through that, we have to address it. That's a big, very, very, very important piece that I feel like I saw time and time again at Kessel Run, and then seeing here at Kobayashi Maru, because the world is changing around us. I feel like our stakeholders are being impacted by that as well. But then internally as an organization, there are different mindsets based in our more traditional training, our route that we took to get here. And we're bringing all those people together. So vision is very, very important to get that alignment, to at least have everybody start to at least see maybe what a common goal is. But then there's so much active leadership that is involved, where you have to be engaged to understand too. There's a you have to tailor it. I realized that coming into Kobayashi Maru, that coming from Kessel Run, there was some of that just built-in alignment already, or built-in kind of approach or mindset. And here I realized really quickly, okay, wait, not everybody had the same background that I did, or not everybody had the same learning experience that I did. And now I really have to, as a leader, go understand where they're at and meet them where they're at, see what they know, and then let's see how to translate it too, because this, as we are hearing, that this transformation has been going on for a while now. So some of this isn't new, it's just called something different. And that's also a weird nuance of like how we're communicating, that common language we can use. So I think definitely in like being really active and engaged in understanding that there is going to be change, it's inevitable. And it means you need to be engaged as a leader to successfully get your organization there. And then also just that second piece of really just kind of adding that care factor, that human factor in, and really communicating very strongly to, even if you just identify it, just say it out loud, even if you don't know exactly how you're going to go through this and you're figuring it out, just being upfront and transparent about that, I feel like goes miles in making sure that folks at least are still joining you in the transformation.
Cool, thank you. Real quick audible for our viewers, we are going to hang around a little bit like longer since we started late. So maybe a little bit like 5-10 more minutes after if you plan to stay. I have one more question around people. We talked about leadership. I kind of want to flip it and talk about the people that make SHIP happen. At our last web event, Ramona, it was around how do we bring in or attract outside talent into the DoD. I wanted to flip that and talk about how do we retain talent that's already in the DoD. Becoming a software company is one thing, but I would say like surviving and thriving, Adam brought up sustaining is another thing. And I think that's like heavily built around the people that you can bring and can ultimately retain. So the next question is, what do you think are the largest challenges in retaining these change agents, these innovators that are already within these organizations that are actually leaving and going and doing something different? What do you think is like kind of the most important thing for the government to focus on to retain these people? Let's start with Adam.
Yeah, I don't know that I did a great job at this, so I'm not sure I'm the right person to provide expertise here. But I think it's really difficult. I think the conversation around like compensation and stuff is a little bit overblown. I think again we're trying to bring digital natives into a non-digital world essentially. So like you have people who have expectations about the way the world should work and how communication should happen, and we drop them into an environment that doesn't allow for it, and we wonder why they're upset about it, or like the idea that like you can't take somebody who grew up with the internet and has been on Twitter their whole lives, and it's like it takes 5 weeks to get an email responded to get a cat card, to go to a place. I just think it's all that stuff, like small things over time that make it impossible to retain talent. But it's like simple things that we just get wildly wrong.
Siobhan, what, like after interacting with people that were in the government, like Brian and Adam, but then seeing them move on, what have you been kind of noticing as these patterns, or like what should the government think about to like make sure that we don't lose folks?
Yeah, I think I'm going to say this over and over again. This is the problem everybody has. It can be the government, it can be anywhere else. Like you've got tenured employees in places where WebEx Teams is like the edge, and you're just like, and they go from Slack to this. Like just as a small example, it's a small thing, but it becomes a bigger hurdle as these things happen every day. So a couple of things. I think if you're legitimately hiring, so everyone on this call here is legitimate because they've done the work, they've sat there, they've written user stories. You've got to have actually done this to be able to sell this. This is really hard, changing how we build software in this new way. The legitimacy of that, because now I know your struggle. It's going to be really hard. You're going to have a head-to-head with somebody who doesn't want to do this. The stakeholder is a very different outcome. I think being a little bit, so this balance of whether we're dealing with leadership and you're setting the vision, or I'm able to then go down in the weeds when I need to get folks who are on the ground who may be getting despondent, keep them going. Because I personally, as a leader, I feel like I'm able to stay close enough. I've done this. I may not have done it as often recently, but I have done it and I know the pain of it. And so we can do it together. That second piece of go reimagine what you could do differently. And for me, a huge part of this, air cover is a bit of a strong word. you'll get support. Once you don't do anything inappropriate, you will get support for whatever ideas you have. And you have that. You're struggling. You don't necessarily think it's the most modern place to work, but go break some stuff and I'll cover it. That combination I've seen do it. Today, right, though, for any of us, just hiring is going to be really difficult. So you've got to set that vision of like, you can go change all this. It's a struggle. It's a struggle. And you have to have a closer on your interview list. Let's be very candid. We all have a closer. We get them all the way there, and then we send that last person in to close the deal. So make sure you have a really good closer.
Yeah, I love that. Speaking of, Brian, I'm going to make you the closer on this question, but we'll go into Rachel. You're one of the few people like me that were in the military and are able to go from a software org to another software org. And that's like not normal. So like, what do you think kind of the perspective to like retaining, the talent that the military has? Do you have any thoughts or opinions?
Yeah, definitely. So the lack of a career path is very difficult to navigate because like coming from one software organization to another software organization completely breaks the model for what is the acquisition officer's career path. I'm supposed to go wide and learn as much as possible, this much about it, but learn as much as possible and gain experience, and then go to somewhere new, try and apply that experience, and I'm never really expected to really take on a lot of responsibility and get deep and get hands-on with something. We're not really individual contributors. We're leaders, we're managers. And so the difference between, I heard you say that, the difference between project and program management and product management is a thing. And I want to just start by saying that, if it were to be true that there are program and project people and product people, how would we look at our force? How would we try and how would we train people? How would we try and grow people? Maybe we would also take it more seriously to realize maybe it's okay to leave product people as product people, because that will make us more successful. Maybe it's okay, we do need both. Maybe it's okay to get really, really smart contract acquisition people who can work in crazy, curious ways that are all within the FAR, all legal. Maybe it's okay to also have those people gain a lot of breadth, gain a lot of experience in that, so that really when we start to send and change those assignments up and send those officers or enlisted out there to different organizations, you can actually see change because there's more of us. I am one of the few, and I don't want to be. I want there to be more of us. And this is really almost pressure on me, because I don't want to leave, because I want to continue this. I want more folks to, I want someone to see this, I want someone to champion this with me. But really that career path, I feel is really vital, especially for the nature of how we assign our officers and our enlisted to these organizations.
Thanks. Yeah, I can definitely empathize with you there. All right, Brian, I'll have you always be closing on the people topic.
Yeah, so I think there's that phrase, people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses. I think that the narrative focuses, especially in the government side of things, too much on how we can't compensate people enough. And most of the people that I know left bad bosses. And there's a parallel too of seeing people go to good bosses. Siobhan's an interesting case, actually. She got a lot of people to come to Kohl's that I'm not saying anything bad about Kohl's, right? But it's retail, and that's not for everyone. And she's got a lot of people that I never would have expected to come to retail and stay in retail and leave some pretty incredible organizations to do that. And so I think that speaks to good bosses. And so what are some of the good things about bosses? I think looking at Google's Aristotle project, the things that make teams effective are also the things that make people stay on teams. So there's your boss, and then there's also your team. So looking at all of those things about meaning and impact that they want to have. The one caveat that I'll say, though, is, one aspect I always say of a good boss, and we talk about this at Rise8, is people want different things. Some people want time off, some people want money, some people want meaning, and it might change, right? All of a sudden you have a kid and you no longer care. You want more time off now. You're not interested in climbing up farther and making more money. So those things can change, and being in tune to that's really important. There are some limitations in government and comp. So when we hire, we need to make sure we're hiring people that care about the mission. It makes them easier to retain. and then making sure that they can have an impact that they want to have, right? So that being able to move up the leadership organization, have more impact more broadly across, say, the Air Force for an Air Force officer, rather than like the Air Force wanted to send me back to intelligence, right? After all of that, after building Kessel Run, 500-person organization, like, let's send you back to Intel. It's time for your 04 leadership. So, like those kinds of things are just untenable. But I think we focus too much on comp entirely, and we can retain people if we had better leadership or bosses, better leadership and managers, and allowed people to have more broad impact by getting things out of the way so they can get shit done.
Cool, thanks. All right, so what I'm going to do in the interest of time, I'm going to ask one question kind of around the process topic, and then one question around the technology topic, and then we'll open it up for like 5 minutes or so from the audience. So for the audience, start thinking about your questions. And if you have a question for a specific person on the panel, please point that out. That'll help us kind of facilitate who answers what. So the next question, specifically around process, it combines both process and people. And it's kind of what Rachel talked about, where like people are the ones that are being impacted by this change. And so it comes down to like disruption. Disruption, it's like what we are doing with digital transformation is not only hard, but it's scary, and scary to a lot of people. And so there is like a legitimate fear, like when we're going through this like transformation of a traditional DoD program into a software company, and like we're improving and creating efficiencies all over the place, it puts at risk like people's safety or jobs at the end of the day. So like how do you handle communicating the value of moving in this direction of a software company that brings in all of these changes for both process improvement and kind of efficiencies? Like how do you handle communicating that value to people that are fearful or going to be impacted by that change? We'll start with Adam.
Siobhan talked earlier about the importance of leaders being able to navigate ambiguity. I think it's also important to recognize that not everybody has that ability or skill. So I think the ability for leaders to continuously and appropriately message what it is we're doing and why we're doing it over and over again is important. I found this to be the hardest part of my job when I was at Kessel Run, and because it's like, we're in these rooms. I'm in the room with Rachel. We're talking constantly about what we need to do. Like nobody else is in that room. So like, while it seems like normal to me, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, there's hundreds of people who are like just waiting to hear like, what is it that I'm doing next? Why should I be worried? And I think it's hard for us to recognize when we're not doing a good job of that. So I think that's one of them. The other thing is you have to bribe people. And I mean, in like find little pieces of value that make them buy in a little bit, right? Get one non-valuable meeting off their plate, give them one piece of technology they've been asking for, find small things to provide value to be like, okay, something's happening here. I'll give you a little bit more runway. So I think there's a couple of strategies there.
Siobhan, what would you say?
Yeah, I'm totally not into bribing. I don't know what Adam's talking about. So what I have found, and I'm not suggesting there's one answer, but there's lots of many ways to do this, right? The one thing I found is when we do any kind of build software differently, we're going to impact process. When we eliminate process and automate it, that's someone's job. That's just a fact. So if we face reality, we can probably change it more quickly. We usually bring those folks in whose job it is to do that, to be architects in the extended balance team. It's not elegant. It's kind of messy. This, very smart people get clued in pretty quickly, but then they start to reimagine what could be. Get them involved super quickly, because you're going to get resistance, but that has to be the way. It does require, and this is just very in the weeds, but like you need skilled facilitators. That's all I'm saying. If anyone's hiring anyone, get yourself a couple of skilled facilitators. It is one of the most important things, but extend the balance team, even if it's painful. Do it for the folks whose jobs are going to be impacted, and there are going to be people. And then there's plenty of smart people who can figure out, like, it's not like there's a shortage of work. You're going to have to reimagine it. And again, that goes to lots of people here have changed their entire careers, what they've done from, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Your story is really valid. Like I didn't do this my whole life. I started as an accountant. Good Lord. It's like years of therapy to get out of that nonsense. But like, you gotta legitimately tell people, like, I get you, man. I had to change my whole career. That goes a long way. Because if you can just be a little bit more human because this is like a big deal, I think you get people there.
Brian, what do you think?
+1 to the skilled facilitator. I know like Jason Frazier and Hetty Stern were two very different facilitators, but they like saved my life. And Jason offers facilitator training, so helped me with that as well. So when I was solo, I could do it. But you know, I think there's one interesting thing here that I always bring up, and that's that you can't really market to two. So Jeffrey Moore is Crossing the Chasm. It's about the law of diffusion for innovation or adoption of ideas. And he says you can never market to two groups at once. He's talking about products, but the same applies to ideas that you're trying to sell. You should never market to the late majority when you're just starting. Like those kinds of things create really big problems, because what ends up happening is when you talk to those people, they want something. Everybody wants something. That's okay, but you can't meet their expectations today. Right? The reason you start a transformation with innovators is because they can make the logical leap between this crazy like MVP to like, oh yeah, I can see how that could replace the Air Operations Center worldwide, right? Everybody else is like, that's just a tanker planner tool. It's really cute, but like it's not going to be an AOC. And so you market to those people. If you start marketing to late majority, they have expectations, and now you've opened the door to them expressing a desire to you, and you can't meet it. And then you find yourself in a position where you have to feed the bureaucracy. And I always said early days of Kessel Run, don't feed the bureaucracy because it grows. There's like a great Native American story about that, about like which wolf on my shoulder grows, the one that I feed. And so you always want to feed the innovation and never feed the bureaucracy, resist it at all costs. And the only way you can do that is actually by ignoring entire market segments for your transformation. You're trying to sell your digital transformation, ignore the late majority market until you need to get there. So only establish or try to establish the champions and the sponsors that you need to get to the next step. Just like lean product, we do the next most valuable thing. Like pick the next most valuable sponsor, the next most valuable champion. Don't try to get everyone on board at once. Then you're trying to sell things to the frozen middle and you just can't yet. That's not to invalidate. When it comes to the people on the ground and like their jobs changing, you have to address that right away. I'm talking more about the like stakeholders and getting buy-in and those kinds of things.
Cool. And then lastly, Rachel, you know, as you're coming into like the Space Force, you know, Space Force is a new organization, and albeit I would say a little bit behind compared to the Air Force as far as thinking about digital transformation and becoming a company. What would you have to say kind of around some of this situation around process improvement and people's kind of impact?
Yeah, so I think especially when we were talking about just like not the specific part about not feeding the bureaucracy, I feel like something like I had just coming in, I'm Air Force. I've been Air Force my entire career. So coming to the Space Force, space is new to me. So this is a brand new domain, and I'm stepping into meetings and conversations with people who this is their whole life, life's work. And I respect that and want to learn that, but I also want to try and make sure that we're not just doing things because they were always done that way. And so I think I went through a stakeholder map and facilitated it well, maybe, but I also key facilitation, very, very, very important. And everyone ended up in the middle of the bullseye where everybody needed all the information all the time. And when we took a step back, we said, okay, wow, we really like have a misunderstanding here. We need to, I think one of the biggest things I've learned coming in is it's okay to like, people are going to talk to you regardless. People are going to come tell you their opinion, tell you what they're unhappy with your organization in doing. That's just going to happen, but understanding who they are and understanding who they work for and understanding who your champions really need to be, who are going to drive that next valuable thing, that like will like pay off so much in the future. Because if those people are happy and those people can turn into advocates and champions and help you tell that story as well, then it suddenly isn't just you've multiplied your ability to communicate this change to help with this transformation. So that's like the one part I think I would rip off that's been very, very helpful to start to kind of like turn things here to be more value added.
Awesome. All right, just kind of shift gears here. The last question I have specifically around technology. I love how Brian and Rachel, you brought up like, don't feed the bureaucracy. I would argue that technology conversations feed the bureaucracy and like overfeed the bureaucracy. So it's like your Thanksgiving turkey in conversations. And so what I kind of wanted to talk about around technology is this idea of misconceptions. The DoD is like notorious for, riding the wave of whatever is the latest buzz. You hear all these buzzwords: DevOps, Agile, software factory, latest and greatest, continuous ATO, but there is like a steep learning curve. What do you believe are like some of the biggest misconceptions within like the DoD software community, kind of around how technology enables transformation? Let's start with Brian.
Number one is where the value line is, which can change over time, by the way. But and by value line, I mean like what differentiates you today. And that is important that you say today, because I recognize it could change tomorrow, and you might want it to change tomorrow. But like today, everybody would generally accept we shouldn't be building our own chips. Although when I say that on LinkedIn, every once in a while, somebody tells me that we should be, because, Chinese, bill of materials kind of thing, but which might be true. And like, maybe we do need to get there, but today that's definitely not the value line. And probably not cloud infrastructure, probably, in my opinion, not cloud platform. And that's one that I think I want to change almost immediately, but I recognize that Kessel Run, we just weren't into a position to do it. So for me, the value line was mission software and the corresponding data. Like that was the immediate value line that I needed to address. Everything below that, I want to spend as little time and money on as possible. And this is the big misconception to me, is everybody wants to focus on technology for technology's sake instead of what value is it providing to the differentiation that I need. And the differentiation we need is like our ability to defend our interests both at home and abroad. And so does a platform really impact that in a major way, like building our own? And I believed at the time the answer was no. And over time, you can change that. Again, you can shift the value line as you become more mature in certain areas. And I think that's part of the transformation too. And so to me, that's number one. And then just understanding what a platform is the other misconception. Like, Kubernetes, for instance, not a platform. It's not a PaaS, I should say. Right? It's a platform for building platforms, right? It is the underlying foundation for a PaaS. But if you're a company that needs a PaaS, you're either going to have to build a PaaS on top of Kubernetes, which is a viable option, or buy it from a commercial vendor. And like, that's one thing that it blows me away, how many generals are talking about Kubernetes today. And Kubernetes is important. I think we need it. I think everybody should be using it at this point. So I'm not trying to say that at all. It's just like, how do you use it? How do you leverage it is a really big misconception today.
Yeah, Rachel, kind of going again from like your transition from Kessel Run into the Space Force and Kobayashi Maru, like what's it like? Think like the conversation around technology in general.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. So my mind, when you asked this question, my mind kind of immediately went to how the acquisition community has kind of started to transform, but maybe our operational community and like our stakeholder community, like who are kind of looking into this and like having some of these misconceptions, they're maybe not as transforming as fast as we are, or maybe not being forced to, or thinking to. So when we are thinking about they're seeing our practices and we're moving faster, we're able to ship faster, and it's possible. We are digitizing really old legacy, laborsome manual workflows and saving so much time. It's insane. And I think the misconception that came to my mind is that modernized like practices are going to develop and update those like concept, we call them ConOps, we're like, are going to update that operation, that we're like on the software side, that the tech that we provide is going to also tell them now what to do with your save time. What changes then in that battlefield? We might, hopefully in our product team level, we're diving deep and we're understanding the context, we're understanding the domain, but we are also still not necessarily ever in the acquisition community saying, hey, you should go do that. We're going to drive your operation. We're going to tell you how to do your job. We're just providing you the tech and the updated tool to do that. And I think I've seen that big struggle with what happens next. When we've met, like we've met an outcome, we've changed a big behavior and seen a lot of really positive ability now, like in the hands of our users. What can they do next? It kind of becomes a really big question.
Cool. Over to you, Siobhan, kind of from your perspective as far as being on the industry side of things.
I'm not responding to Brian's comments about Kubernetes. I'm just kidding. look, everyone, there's always going to be a shiny new tool. There's always going to be amazing marketing out there from big software companies that build some really cool stuff. That's just a reality of life. Just on a very personal level, how I deal with it, I want to get ahead with the sales folks from these fabulous companies, because I can't stop the influence or story-eyedness of whomever is going to want to buy that next best tool. But I'm super happy to meet with folks and just ask them how it helps me sell more jeans. And I think you get really close to what are you going to do to help the outcome that my company cares about, whether it be, you know, build better bicycles or do whatever it is you're doing, and then not speak until the answer is delivered. And it's an awful lot of quiet time, because it's really hard when you're selling software to be able to tie that knot to every single person you go meet. And if you can change that conversation way up there before it starts to get into the POs getting signed and we're heading down a path, and now we're all going to have to roll out this new thing that no one knows how it fits with anything. But if you can start there, not everyone has the luxury of having that moment, but that's my mode. I just would like to know how it helps us, sell more jeans. Super simple question, really hard to answer.
Adam?
+1 to everybody. And I think it's led from particularly the DoD, the people who are in the positions to make decisions almost never really understand their organizations. We have no concept of what the current state of our organizations are. So we don't have the ability to make proper decisions here. So we rely on technical decisions being made by people who are in positions who have perverse incentives to make certain technical decisions. And the problem that we continue to run into is technologists understand technology really well, and you might be able to give them a problem. They might find you the perfect tool to be able to solve that in the right way. In the utopian world where humans aren't complex and things go the right way all the time. But like next to that technologist, you need somebody who knows psychology and sociology and the nature of what your organization is today, right? Like we can't pattern match to a tech giant when we're still learning how to tie our shoes. And I think that continues to happen over and over again. It's just a lack of awareness over our own organizations, perpetuated by, the nature of like military officers rolling through organizations once a year. But even for the civilian folks, like we don't do enough work to understand truly what's going on throughout our organizations.
Awesome. Sweet. Thank you all for that conversation there. I wish we had more time. What I'll do is I'll take two, maybe three, depending on how fast we answer these questions from the audience. The first question that I'll take is from Alec. He said, what is the #1 challenge that is eating most software factories' lunch when it comes to post-development? It appears that most do dev and sec very well, but ops or sustainment is challenging in live environments. Is there anyone that kind of wants to answer that from our panelists?
I would say that phrasing like development and sustainment as dev and ops is not the way that I would phrase that necessarily. So I think like there's some kind of language differences there. But I think to answer the question directly, I think it's like cargo culting to a degree. I think that we haven't learned what actually made things successful. So we're taking surface layer stuff and we are trying to repeat those things and hope the airplanes come out of the sky. I think we just have a lot more work to do in understanding the true like valuable pieces that were ingrained in the successful starts of these programs.
Yeah, I think there's this phrase about, usually it's the alleged defenders of an idea that do more damage to it than its actual, contrarians. And I think that happens here. A lot of the fans of the software factories are actually causing them the most problems. Like I think Kessel Run, a lot of times, my perception is that most of their pain was coming from alleged, advocates for it. And where I see that play out the most is kind of in a cargo culty way, taking surface level observations and like, I'm going to fix this problem. And they go fix it in maybe the worst possible way. So one thing that I would say that is eating everybody's lunch is Kessel Run in particular had to solve every single problem along the way to get apps to prod, including things like networking, right? Like, so if you want to continuously deliver in the DoD, you have to solve networking. You have to solve all sorts of like root infrastructure concerns, facilities concerns, clearances, hiring, like all these crazy things. And the Air Force comes in and they're like, enterprise solution, the thing that we're going to fix from the enterprise is PAS. And it's like, why are you starting at PaaS? Like, could you start with infrastructure, hiring, networking? Can you fix SIPRNet for me? And they'll say things like, oh, the enterprise eats variance, and like, this is a variance. It's like, well, hold on. Like, before you worry about this little variance over here, there's a reason that it's a variance. And like, it's because SIPR sucks. So can we go fix, sorry, SIPR is the secret network for those that are uninitiated. Like, can you go fix our networking challenges as a small little program with a relatively small budget compared to the people that deal with worldwide DoD networks? Like, I shouldn't be solving my own secret network problem. Those kinds of things. I wish leadership was more focused on those more core foundational issues than getting up in my business about DevSecOps pipelines and PaaSes.
Yeah, totally. Cool. The next question I'll take is from Chelsea. What is your advice to someone lower in the government totem pole, say a lieutenant, for example, who is running into a frozen lower middle? In other words, like, leadership at all levels are vocally supportive of change and innovation, but the government, civilians, and contractors that have worked there for a very long time don't want to change. Maybe I'll pass this to Rachel.
Ooh, I like the lower level. I think something we haven't talked about is that maybe like there would come a time when, if we were hiring, we are looking for certain skill sets, and we're looking for maybe like growth mindsets and different skills that aren't necessarily in like program offices today when we're trying to do certain things. I think it's huge that you have higher level leadership support, because we've said without that, that's the thing that is definitely going to slow things down. But the fact that you have that, I feel like the piece here, I would, maybe the advice I would give is have a more honest conversation with that person. Maybe they're on your team, maybe there's someone you can work near, and maybe reset on some expectations on what you're looking to do to meet some of those higher level objectives. I think maybe a shared goal could be that you're both looking to support what your higher level leadership's, what their outcome is. And that can be a goal that you could align around. And then maybe there's some brainstorming you can do together of ways to kind of try and go approach that. To what Siobhan mentioned earlier, good facilitation in that conversation could potentially help, or good facilitation in like a brainstorming session together could help too. But it definitely, I feel like, has to start with just understanding maybe like where they're coming from a little, but also finding something to align to, because it sounds like it might exist there.
So from a consulting perspective, the one thing I like better about consulting, the only thing I think, is that you have more room to maneuver more aggressively in situations like this. So one thing that I've been doing is, I like to call it riding the elephants. I like to find all of the most awkward conversations that everybody's avoiding and like purposely bringing them up, and getting people who I'm having like maybe a trouble with have to say stuff in a room that like you can then repeat places, right? So like I want somebody to have to tell me, I actually don't want empowered teams. I want to maintain all of my authority. Like once they say those words, then I can go like have a conversation with the people who like are proponents of this new way of working, usually who are like, then like you can kind of make that work to your advantage. So I don't know if that works in like as a lieutenant, but works for me.
Cool. Siobhan, did you want to add anything before I kind of wrap things up?
Danger on the public shaming. I think Rachel's giving a really practical, like, this is what you might do. And it's a really practical way that I would approach it. And I would think there's this one thing, because Brian knows I was definitely going to say this. So this, probably the most important lesson out of my time at Pivotal was being clear on the difference between kind and nice. Super, super important. We get all unclear about them here. So kind is being super direct, not aggressively, just very direct. This is it. This is the path we're on. There may be a different path somewhere else for you if you're not into this, but like, we're going to be super clear, like, this is it. And nice is like, oh, okay, yeah, all right. And then going outside and talking about them. So being crystal clear on kind versus nice is super, super important. Humans are able to deal with kind. Honestly, they really are. We think they're not. That's why we avoid all the conflict and all the discussions. And so what Adam was bringing up was like, just rip the behind that off and do the whole, like, just do it all in public. There's steps into it. I think I am obviously a fan a little bit of Adam and his techniques, but I do think there's a way to step into it. But just be careful. Like, kind is being direct and honest. Nice is just avoiding it. And that's what Rachel was trying to give as an example of, let's just go in there. We've got to do it. Not everyone's going to come on the journey. Also know that.
Cool. Thank you. So this has been a really amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I hope everybody on the panel has, and all of our viewers. So what I want to wrap up with is just with each of our guests, what is one takeaway that you want folks who have been listening to you or to watch this in the future? What do you want them to take away out of this conversation? And we'll just kind of go around the room. We'll start with Adam.
I guess I would say that you kind of have to make a decision going into this, if it's about you or the thing you're trying to achieve. And I think that decision will drive, the strategies you employ and the decisions you make from there.
Siobhan?
Oh, that's the mute button. Okay. So we're going to start with my movie is Trading Places. We're just going to finish that, land that plane there. And we all, I don't care if you are the CEO, the CTO, or an analyst, or a lieutenant, or a captain, your job is to build new habits. You've got to build new habits, and you can do them all the time. And like staying in shape, you're going to have to work out every single day for the rest of your life and eat well if you want a long and healthy life. It is kind of painful. That's the job. And it's fun if you do it, right? So it's new habits, and you've got to challenge yourself to build new habits all the time. That means you're also going to have to let go of some old habits. It's a lifelong journey, like we're all on it. So that's just it. And know that everybody, no matter what level, everybody is needing, in this day and age in 2021, everyone has to build new habits to make this work long term.
Cool. Rachel?
Yeah, I think really, really clearly, it's not that we believe it should or it could transform, it's that it has to transform. And that means what Siobhan said, taking steps. There's action that's going to have to happen, but it's that it has to happen. So that's the one thing I would say.
And then Brian.
I'll build out on Siobhan's there and say a habit. The first habit that you have to build is being less certain and coming up with actual disciplined and concrete ways that you're going to challenge your own assumptions and get other people around you to challenge them. So yeah, be less certain, except for about one thing. This is the paradox of certainty. You should be certain about you and your team's ability to learn once you've questioned, so that you don't end up in the Descartesian trap there.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you to our wonderful guests, Rachel, Adam, Siobhan, Brian. Thank you to everybody that's tuned in live to our second web event. Hopefully there's going to be a lot more to come and that you've enjoyed it and will continue to listen. And so I think I'll end this with whatever famous YouTube or Twitch streamers usually end with. If you like this today, make sure to smash that subscribe, and follow button so you don't miss out next time. Cheers and happy holidays. Thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.